Welcome, everybody. It's time for Stall Talk. We're on episode 17. I'm your host, Kendra Dixon. I am really excited once again because we get to deep dive another week. We deep dive every day at Stall High. It's an app just for horse people. And it's not just an app. It's kind of like Netflix, but not Netflix. You can access 600 hours and growing of video content, instructional content, where you can get answers to the real problems, what's really going on with your horse. We also have an online mentor program where you can talk to a professional coach 5 nights a week. It's really cool to see how horses are starting to change, how riders are starting to change through an online program. We really didn't understand how profound the results would be because, for the most part, we're horse trainers. We're not neuroscientists. But through this process of building Stall High and the online mentor program, it's been really fun to uncover answers that we didn't even know existed. We knew there's a problem. We feel the problem in our horses. We can feel it in ourselves, but we as a horse community don't necessarily know how to solve it. Today, we're going to talk to Martin Patella once again, lifeenthusiast.com. Martin's going to bring his expertise to the table and talk about that mind-muscle connection, how and why our body is reacting the way it is, and how things we eat, how we take care of ourselves, or the lack of how we take care of ourselves is impacting the performance of our horse. All the while, we're scratching around and running circles trying to find the right products for our horse. We're overlooking the obvious, that we need to take responsibility to take care of ourselves as well. We've got Lori Roth moderating all the way from Nacogdoches, Texas. She's my right-hand woman at Stall High. This would not be possible without her. If you have questions, if you have a hot topic that you want us to uncover and really dive into, or if you want to recommend a guest, be sure to send us an email, info@stallhigh.com. With all of that housekeeping done, let's dive right in. Our guest this week is Savannah Alley Jackson. Savannah, thank you so much for coming back.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. It's been a fun journey. Kendra is one of my heroes. I just think she's just so amazing. I love her as a lady and a horsewoman, and she's just so dedicated to bringing this knowledge to a world that, we get to do now, like she said, online and make such a bigger impact in ourselves and our horse communities and in our horses primarily. So thank you. Happy to be a part of it.
Speaking of big impact, we met you during our second clinic online. This is back early 2021. We did a series called Better Posture, Better Horse. Somehow you and I connected through digital marketing, I think. We made the horse connection. And as I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking, well, there's someone else who doesn't talk like we talk. We need her. Hey, come teach us. Come share your keys. What keys do you have in your hand? What wisdom, what experience, what expertise do you possess that we don't, that can help us be better riders, get a better result with our horse, and basically, even if we think it's the gold buckle or the trophy or the trophy saddle that we're after, it's really not. It's the relationship we want with our horse. It's the relationship we want with our friends and family. That's what we're trying to improve. Your expertise is in understanding the structure, what's going on underneath the saddle. So tell us a little bit about the optimum horse. Why are you so passionate about speaking up for how a horse is built?
Sure. So a lot has, I've grown, but a lot has changed inside of the Optimum Horse and the way I teach since early 2021. But it's just, I love that we're always growing together as a community. So the Optimum Horse was something that I founded a few years ago, but I've been doing. So I don't like to call myself a body worker but it is a shorthand way to say, essentially, I'm working with their bodies. But it's much more profound than that. And basically, long story short, is I come from a hunter jumper background, not really hunters so much, more jumpers, but also some eventing and just, a kid riding horses growing up, like out in the woods. But what I noticed in my early 20s was that, all these horses seem to have similar patterns and ways of going, even with all the best care, chiropractic and, acupuncture and joint injections and saddles fitting and all the stuff that we do.
Mhm.
And I was like, but why are they just not changing that much from, 1 month to the next, or one body session to the next?
Mhm.
And it kind of set me on this path of like, there's got to be something out there that, is more effective. Well, long story short, I had to develop it myself. And we've come a long way. There's lots of other really great, we've just come so far as a horse community, globally, in learning about horses and the technology, and also just how their bodies are put together and how they work and how the relationships of their body parts function. But the Optimum horse really came, I traced it back. Basically, I learned how to identify asymmetries in their body, or crookedness, or handedness, or laterality, or, however, there's many different ways to describe it.
Wow.
And I basically learned how to fix that first, because I just wanted a better experience as a rider from my horses. So that was in 1998. Fast forward to now, I then kept asking the question, well, why, and where does it come from? And I looked at all the external factors, our saddles, that we're right-handed, that our farriers are right-handed, that whatever, all these different things that we look at. And I'm like, none of those really, that, let's say racehorses only run to the left. So all these things didn't really explain the patterns that I was finding in horses' bodies. From one breed to the next, one discipline to the next, they were all similar. They were all very much the same. And I'm like, okay, where does this come from? And I reverse engineered it back to the normal birthing process. Mm-hmm. And the normal birthing, and we don't think about this. Not many people think about this. And it was really eye-opening for me, because I was like, immediately looked for research and all these different, I'm like, somebody must have studied this. Like, I'm not a vet. I wanted to be a veterinarian, but I got, kind of down this rabbit hole instead. And I was like, somebody must be talking about this. And it wasn't out there. I was like, this is just crazy to me. So it took me about 15 years to own it. Like, who am I really to speak about it? But I had really had to own that. And that's just a personal confidence thing as well. And just talking about it, and also working with people who had worked with some of the best in the world, Dr. Carrie Ridgway and Manolo Mendez, and all these people that, that were on the fringe of talking about these different body asymmetries and how to fix them. Right. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to claim it. So that's what the Optimum horse is. It's really about having the optimum horse. And that's why it's named that, but also being able to look at their body's symmetries, asymmetries, and connect them to what we're experiencing as riders and as horse people, whether we're a professional riding them, or a professional saddle fitter, or a professional body worker, or a vet, or any of these professions that go along with what we do, and help people, number one, identify these asymmetries and start to develop their eye for them, but ultimately to get a better result out of what we're already doing. Like, I'm just trying to move the needle forward for everybody. So the Optimum horse really just, I made it, I have my practice, of course. I've been doing it for 25 years. That's kind of scary to say, but again, just like the teaching part of it became really my priority. And that's how Kendra and I met, was in early, that was my COVID pivot, was to develop a digital online program and, clone myself, teach more people how to fix it. Because what I had learned how to do was to fix it. And it is a permanent change. That's the thing that's really groundbreaking. So I'm happy to talk about, I could talk, for hours, but how we're going to condense this into like today's Stall High talk is, right. I'll give you a couple little highlights, like I do have a 1 hour presentation that goes into, I just produced it. It's the signs of asymmetry in our horses. And I categorize them into 7 categories. And it's like how to start to look and evaluate these asymmetries in your horses, but then correlate it back to the birth pattern. And it's just really eye-opening, but it's really about bringing awareness to the whole conversation. So there's that, but we can talk about just some little things that you can use as tools to start to look at your horses and start to look at your own patterns that you've seen and just aha moments and connect the dots. So that's what we're here for.
Love aha moments. That's what we're all about at Stall High. So I was recently talking to a tree maker and a saddle maker. We were having a great meeting of the minds. And one of them looked at me and said, but it's very rare to have a horse that is level on both sides, that's symmetrical. He said, most horses are asymmetrical. Do you know why? And thanks to Savannah, thanks to you, I was like, it's because they're born that way. And I could see like the look on his face. He was like, oh, she knows, because he's so used to people not knowing. Well, I didn't know either, quite frankly, until I listened to you in Better Posture, Better Horse. I didn't know like that's so just briefly, people who don't know.
Yeah.
Why is a horse, how is a horse shaped and all horses born? Are there ever exceptions? You know, what are we dealing with? Or like, oh, wow, I didn't even look down to even think about that.
Yeah, we don't think about it because I also think like, I live in Lexington, Kentucky right now, but I travel all over the country. But even the veterinarians and this is a highly reproductive area, right? Like with the thoroughbred industry specifically. But, even the vets here that have been working in the thoroughbred industry, they're just like, why haven't we thought of this? And it's the same experience. I mean, and the funny thing is, because I'm very vocal on social media, and I'm always talking about it, like in all these different groups, like for years, and people are finally talking about it. Like, oh yeah, it's the birth pattern. It's like, yep. And these are people I don't personally know, but again, the conversation and collective consciousness grows. And so the birth pattern, obviously there's going to always be exceptions. There's no 100% black or white with horses anytime, anywhere. However, most of the time, and I have noticed that this does vary by breed a little bit. I mean, mostly in thoroughbreds, quarter horses and warm bloods are the ones that I work on most, but there are going to be variations. I just haven't had my hands on enough of the populations of like draft horses or Lusitanos or, there's all the different variations. But I will just give you from a thoroughbred, we'll talk about thoroughbreds because they're like, I could even almost say 100% of the time born the same way if there's no complications. And even if there are some complications, if they, dystocia is when they get a leg back or they're turned the wrong way, and then they have to reposition the foal in the mother, and then they come out. So that's a variation. But let's just say normal birth, everything goes great. They actually start, you know what? I wish I had my Breyer horses here. I usually have some props, but we're going to use an elephant.
All right, we're going to use our imagination.
So let's say, here's a mother horse. They actually start in the womb upside down, a foal, like in the last part of, like right before they're born. So that's called dorsoventral. And if the, hind end of the mare is here, they actually have to come out, and they come out. How many of you have seen a foal born? They present, a normal presentation is like their feet and then their nose, and then the rest of them comes out. So, but a normal presentation is usually one foot is ahead of the other. And in thoroughbreds, the right front foot is almost always the initial presentation foot. And so what happens is, because they start upside down, but they come out right side up, they have a rotational twist through their body. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that because they come out one foot ahead of the other, they have to shift, like the sternum and the shoulder blades are the widest part of the baby to come out first. So they actually have to shift their shoulder blades to make themselves as small as possible to fit out the birth canal. So they shift their one side forward is almost always the right side. That shifts in an adult horse. You have an adult horse, their whole right side is shifted forward, and then the left side is held back. So their pelvis, if you put your hands on a horse's pelvis, you could feel it. This is again, if just they have layers of asymmetry and compensation, and that's what I talk about in the presentation. But the initial origin of asymmetry, the birth, I call it birth physiology, is left hip is high and back, right hip is low and forward. Now the rotational twist. So all horses have a diagonal bias. It's not, I don't like to use the term right-handed, left-handed,
Okay.
banana right, banana left, because it's diagonal. It's like it's a diagonal bias. So it changes how they move depending on the gait, direction they're going, etc. So like, I think handedness, that's a whole other conversation, but it gets confused because it's not, in humans, it's a brain thing where we learn to use our hands differently. In horses, it's a balance thing. It's just a form follows function. So right side shifts forward, left side is back, but then they push harder with their left hind. That makes their dominant leg the left hind leg. And they are pushing diagonally, because if the right hind is not pushing as hard, what would they do? They would go into a circle, right?
I'm going to grab my demo real quick. Keep talking.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. But so what also happens is that twist, it's a left hind to right front, but then the sternum is rotated down to the right. So down into the right leg. So the entire sternum gets shifted right. And that's most horses. So she's getting her demo, horsey.
Okay, this is ultra. Because I did not know, like, it was mind blowing to me when people started explaining the X in the middle of the horse. Barrel racers are not taught about that. We're not. Okay. We're just like, what? So just
you can fill in the blank with any discipline there, by the way. It's not
took
just
me a
barrel
long
racers.
time to really marinate on the diagonal bias. Okay, so guys, for those of you who are new to this, the X in the middle of the horse, here it is. So here's your horse, here's
I love
the
it.
corners. All right,
Yep.
so your right hip pushes the left shoulder. So many people think their barrel horse has a shoulder problem. Before the left shoulder drops, this right hip, see the diagonal has disengaged, and that's why we drop like that.
It's good. I like the X. Yeah, and I will say, so in quarter horse, so thoroughbreds, I've done tens of thousands of horse sessions. I have never met a thoroughbred that has a right hip birth pattern. So I just described I call it left hipped or left hind dominant. That's the left hind to right front bias. The right hind being dominant, I've literally never encountered that in a thoroughbred ever. Like I've talked to a few vets that a baby can be born with the left front presenting, but I don't know what that means for the rest of the body. There could be other complications. So I haven't had my hands on that baby, but I've never met a right hip dominant racehorse thoroughbred. Now, quarter horses, I'm finding, are about a 50-50 split.
Why is that?
I don't know. We get to figure it out. I don't know. I know. And I think it has to do with genetics and lines and all these things, but I also think it has to do with the mare. And warm bloods are like a 70-30 split. So 70 left hipped, 30 right hipped. But I have worked on a right hip dominant warm blood mare, and she had 2 foals from surrogate mares, like so embryo transfer. Mm-hmm. Same stallion dad. Both of those babies were also right hipped. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, genetics. I don't know. Just a starting point, but I don't have an answer for that.
I think that turning left.
Martin?
I think that turning left on the track would possibly hint, because you select.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Select?
You go for selection, right? You go for better candidates, and you end up the winners get bred more often, right?
That's a great point. The what I think, so going to that line of thinking, in Europe, they run the opposite way. Right? They run clockwise. Yes, clockwise.
Okay.
Because they knew horses were so a left-hipped horse is going to fall into the right. It's going to load its right front. It's going to have a harder time with the right lead because they're putting weight in the right front. This is like if you look at grazing patterns, they almost always, it's going to create high-low in their feet. Their foot's going to get bigger on the right. They usually pop splints on that right front first. Just a couple of the patterns. But so in Europe, they went the direction that the horse is already falling. Like they were smart about it. In America, we went, we're going to do it the opposite. I've heard actually vets say this because we joke about it. And so we're being the dum-dums that we are as Americans sometimes. We decided to do the opposite thing, which that is totally counter to what is natural for the horse.
So that's something like you're preaching to my choir, because I see so much happening in the barrel industry specifically. It's just always the way it's been done for the past, 50, 60 years, but nobody questions it. It's like we all hit a plateau and like, oh, we just accept that's the way it is. And nobody ever like continues to rethink or think a little deeper.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. But again, going back to selection, maybe that's back because again, all of our thoroughbreds are from Europe first. Maybe that's what they did so that the horses would run better to the right. So the ones that were ran better to the right, they just bred more. So totally great.
And
Great point.
Savannah,
Yeah.
Savannah, so there is something to be said for also quarter horses. There is so much variation and they are so specifically bred within the quarter horse for their disciplines, and they're built differently. So there may be something to that. For instance, the quarter horse that races is completely different than a quarter horse that is a cutter.
Great
And
point.
so,
Yeah, they're
you know,
lines,
they're-
right? They use different breeding lines.
Right. So
Yeah,
there may be something there.
Yeah, I totally like again, this is the quarter horse thing came out of most of my students that, some of which have come from Stall High, but that have majority quarter horses. And we started going, wow, that one's right hipped. Yep, that one's right hipped too. And that one's right hipped. And we're like, wow, where did this? Okay, hold on a second. Because I just thought majority of horses were the opposite, but now it's like, so I'm learning more stuff all the time. Like it's just a wide open field.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm so proud of our interactive members who are joining your program, because we're very passionate about learning. Now that we've gotten that fire lit, right? The ignition has happened. We're absorbing knowledge as just as fast as we can and connecting the dots. It turns this problem into an adventure. Like we're all on this adventure together. So guys, if you're watching right now, maybe on YouTube, maybe on Facebook or TikTok, and you're just chiming in thinking, what have I just clicked into? You've clicked into something called Stall Talk that is representative of Stall High, the app. Within the Stall High app, there's an online mentor program. We have live discussions every night of the week, Monday through Friday, and we are solving horse and rider problems through wisdom, not just another product. If that has your attention, email us or download the app. Savannah, back to you. So
I just look at one of the questions. I see a question. Can I?
Yes, and then I want you to talk about hugging your horse from behind, because that helped me really understand it when you taught me to do that.
Yeah. And that was the cool thing is we got to meet in person in 21 and work on a couple of her horses together. It was pretty cool. So feral horses, I don't know about feral, but wild. Let's just talk about wild horses, Mustangs. I lived in, the Eastern Sierra in California for like 20 years. And so we had a lot of Mustangs out there. And I actually had a Mustang myself, same birth patterns. And it was also, again, part of what had me like connect it back. But I'm like, in a perfect world, if God is perfect and everything's made perfectly, obviously they have to be asymmetrical to come out of the birth canal correctly. But secondly, that makes them stronger in one direction. So they're maybe going to have a tendency to flee more in one direction, which I'm guessing they're going to push harder off the left hind and go to the right more often. So it's still there, but does it become a problem for a wild horse? No, not really, because there's no humans involved. Like we want them to be symmetrical and do things the same, both directions, and sit on them and put things like saddles on them that are symmetrically made. And so that whole coming back to the conversation about saddles, like I don't know a ton about Western saddles, but they're all again made and they can be fitted for a horse. Well, in an English saddle, people change the flocking and and they actually fit the asymmetries. And I'm like, well, that's great. but let's get the horse symmetrical. Like a lot of saddle fitters will call me in to work on horses first, because then the horses actually become symmetrical or more symmetrical as it develops as time goes on. But then they have an easier time fitting a saddle. And then we're not creating a saddle to then maintain their asymmetry. We're actually encouraging them to stay symmetrical in their work and in their development and everything else.
Okay, this is definitely going the way we want it to go. Like you're getting there. So I know everybody's ears just went, what?
Yeah.
All right. So let's start with just a simple diagnosis. How can
Oh
someone
yeah, the hips.
sit around their horse and feel the hip bones?
Well, again, you always want to make sure you're safe or comfortable standing behind your horse, because a lot of times, like one of the things that I teach is, as we start to identify and palpate these points, like all the assessment points that I teach, there's something called attunement, which is a word that's a psychological, human psychology term that basically means that we're acknowledging, I see you, like I see what's happening. I acknowledge that what's happening. I can see you and I understand. Excuse me. And that's very healing for a human. And it's just as healing for a horse. And so a lot of horses have been, misinterpreted. They've been I've even had horses that hate chiropractors. And it's just that it's not that there's anything wrong with that profession. It's just that there's this piece that is missing from all of our interactions. And so these horses are like, that's not it. That's not fixing it. And then you start to assess them in a way that you're identifying their birth patterns. And they're like, oh, finally. It's kind of spooky almost. And they literally will start to change just in the acknowledgement of that we see where their body is. And then if you're learning how to fix it, then you're going to learn how to fix it. But one of the things I'll do is I'll put my hands, I'll palpate their pelvis. I watch them walk. This is all again a lot of this is in the 1 hour presentation that I just released. It's on sale right now. It's only $47. I know it's a shameless plug, but I'm just being upfront. So you can still purchase that, but it has a lot of these things in it in the visual categories. But so palpating their hip bones, and you put your hands on the tuberosity, which is the prominent hip bone of each side from behind. You have to make sure you're standing squarely. You're not like, oh, I think but again, be safe and do it lightly, because they have a lot of pain around their hip bones a lot of times. And, you just got to be aware of it, be in tune with your horse and what they're telling you. So, but you will feel the asymmetry. And that's one of the tools that I use when I am working on horses as a private session to, I'll have the owners, I'll be like, here, come feel this. And they're like I did with you, right, Kendra? And I said, okay, and I worked on the horse, and then I go, now feel it. And they're like, oh my God, it's the same. How did you do that? Mm-hmm. But it's a great tool to start you tuning into what's happening with your horses. And it will answer a lot of questions, right? Of how they're loading and how they're moving. And
yes, it's what's frustrating is not knowing. Once we have information, and I think a better question, rather than saying what's wrong with my horse, let's challenge ourselves to stop thinking something's wrong and start asking what's missing. What don't I know yet? And then join us at Stall High. We're on a mission to learn. Martin, I'm going to hand it to you. So you've been listening, and I know you can make some connections here for the rider.
I came out as a fairly badly damaged horse. And what's interesting is in my 20s, I had myself poisoned with mercury through dental work. And after that happened, my body started falling apart. Mercury has this ability to affect the digestive system, which then destroys the cartilage. And I was coming apart, like I was twisting. And I don't have the pictures. I'd love to have them. But when I was about 36 or so, I went to a Rolfing session. Ida Rolf, ROLF. It's a 10-session program. You go in and they totally restructure all the fascia in your body. Essentially, they pull you apart and allow you to snap back together in a symmetrical manner. And I've had pictures where when I started, I had one shoulder up, and the other one down and forward, and the opposite reaction in the hips, right? So as you see me shoulders this way, well, my hips would be this way.
Yeah.
And my ears were not level, and my shoulders tops were not level, and my hip bones were not level. And there's this classic right hip forward and up. That's when you don't love yourself. There's an emotional bit that actually is tied into this. So there are many, many methods, right? Like there is the dynamic method, like Feldenkrais. There's this chiropractic. Some are just very mechanical, but some really understand that they actually need to allow and create space into which you will pop in rather than try and force stuff someplace. Instead, create an opening into which this life force will flow. And I tried Alexander therapy, McKenzie therapy, Feldenkrais, alpha biotics, because I was broken, right? So I was hunting for these things. And the
Okay,
last
my
thing
mind.
that I did was called, it's a Swiss thing. What the heck is it called? Atlas Prophylax. Atlas is the top of your spine, the number one vertebra, and prophylaxis in prophylaxis prevention. Anyway, the relationship, if you could think of your skull as a golf ball that's sitting on a ring, and then you can have rotation. And if it doesn't sit right, then the spine, the what the heck is it called in English? The nerve bundle that goes from the brain into the column between the vertebrae gets pinched in various ways. And if there's a rotation, whether it's on the horizontal plane or whether it's a tilt, all of these things will affect functioning all the way from the head to the pelvis. And if you have your head on screwed wrong, your pelvis will compensate in the opposite direction. And there's an inflection point somewhere in the middle that'll hurt. And so you could have
Okay.
a pain here. I mean, it's an S thing, right? So if you're off this way, there's a point right here, there's a point right here, and there's further down below the screen that are all playing in it. And you need to figure out how to straighten it all out. And the top issue here is emotion.
Yeah.
Our body will store injuries or memories, all memories, happy or unhappy. It will store it in soft tissue.
Mhm.
And you can release it through body work and through process, for example, body talk or emotion code or tapping, the emotional freedom technique. All of these are tools that are available to us to release the body.
Yeah.
When I
So-
think of me, I'm like the driver of the car. I'm wearing this suit made of meat. I'm the owner of it, but I don't control it because the thing has a mind of its own. So like when you think of yourself riding a horse, that's like me trying to wear my body. That's just, it has a mind of its own. And you need to let it evolve. You need to release the blockages. You need to release the patterns. And then you can go straight.
Nobody talks like this. Nobody
Yeah.
has these sessions in the horse.
I love it.
So
I-
excited to be having.
Martin brought up a fantastic point because I get all the time, like it's one of these like personal jokes with myself. Like every time I'm out working on horses, I literally get at least one person like, can you work on me? And the thing is, that's different. I mean, yes, I have worked on people. And by the way, the modalities that I use or that are part of the Optimum Horse. So the whole method I've coined it symmetry physiology. So it's about getting their entire physiology in symmetry. That's, you know, structural, nutritional, emotional, or digestive and emotional. So horses' primary source of stress mostly comes from structure. Humans, we also have birth patterns. Our issues mostly are emotional, as Martin just said. And so I explained this, like horses don't usually have emotional primary problems or a source of their stress first. There are a few. I mean, it can happen. It's not that it doesn't happen. Their primary issue is almost always structural, which, you know, going back into kind of the way that this works is, you know, and again, any living thing, you know, human, dog, cat, bird, you've got the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic, parasympathetic. So sympathetic is the fight, fright, or flight. I've also added freeze and fidget. And then there's parasympathetic, which is our natural healing state where we heal ourselves. And that's the rest, digest, make babies, get stronger, think. There's an entire list. It's actually in my freebie members group where I have a list of all the physiology that goes with sympathetic versus parasympathetic. And that can be in any living form. So humans' primary source of stress are almost always, emotional. And that's like, that requires different modalities to address than just that. People are like, why do my body work? Like it works, it feels great for a minute, but then it goes right back because you're not addressing the source of the problem, which is emotional. And then horses, when you address the structural, then, nutrition is closely related. Like, so a lot of horses do have nutritional as their primary source. Like, let's say you have a mare that they didn't know was pregnant, or you have a mare that went through she was a high performance horse, did not get a chance to replenish her own body before she started getting bred. That's going to create a bankrupt nutritional baby. So all these things you look at, but there is actually a way to figure all that out and, reverse engineer it. And that's what I teach. But so structural, if you're out of whack structurally, but your nutrition is good, but your structure is going to actually put you in that sympathetic, dominant, or fight, fright state. One of the top things that happens physiologically is that digestion shuts down. Why do we have this, epidemic with ulcers? It's because of that dynamic. So all these things are related, but yes, emotion for people, horses, mostly structural, but nutritional is all kind of combined.
Just did a
So
bullseye.
funny thing, I'll just pump this in. With humans, we can be one of the two models. Model A is made alkaline by carbohydrates, starches, and made more acidic by fats and proteins. Those are autonomics. But there's the other model called oxidizer, which is flipped. It gets more alkaline by fats and proteins, and it's acidified by starches. And this sympathetic, parasympathetic, the sympathetic lives in the acidity and the parasympathetic lives in the alkalinity. So when I over-alkalize you, you will become over-parasympathetic and you'll be depressed.
Wow.
If I over-acidify you, you will be over-sympathetic and you will be either anxious if it's inward directed or angry if it's outward directed.
Wow.
And this is the
Well,
freeze, the freeze or fight, right? This is the sympathetic side. Acidity breeds that. And so what happens is, of course, we have this button that calls for the fight or flight behavior. And so when I get in the automobile, for example, and start driving, I now have to go 360 aware all the time, every intersection. Oh, and every time somebody honks and everything that goes all around me, right? So it's difficult to be relaxed or parasympathetic while driving.
Mhm.
So if you drive for a long time, you're going to be stressed out of your mind. And because the rest and repair lives on the other side, you're going to age faster because you're not repairing, because you're wearing quicker.
I want to circle you back to something. Savannah, you reinforced what he said. Martin, you blew my mind. I'm going to circle back to something, and I quote, in humans, the right hip is typically forward and up, and that's when we don't love ourselves. How do you know that? What don't we know? Explain that, please.
Oh my, this gets really complicated or simple, depends. So Chinese science meridians, acupuncture points, each of the meridians has different organs on it, runs through different parts of your body. You can get the map out. Each one of these is also associated with a certain specific emotion and a word and whatever. So if this is now me not being, what's the word, precise here. But for example, if anxiety, no, other word, let's pick something. Daddy problems live
Okay.
on a certain meridian. Fear, I know that fear lives on the kidney meridian, for example. Resentment lives on the liver meridian.
When you were
Wow.
describing like the S curve and if our
Yeah.
head's not on straight,
Yeah.
swivels, the different pains. So guys, just think about this for a second. Just visualize how much we have going on if we're not paying attention, if we're not purposefully trying to improve our health mentally, physically, and spiritually. We take all of that, all of those complexities and put them right on top of our horses. And that becomes our horse's burden to bear. Savannah, you reinforce what he said. When our bodies go back to the problem, it's because we aren't addressing the emotion. And when a horse's emotional problem goes back to the emotion, it's because people have missed the mechanics. They're still holding the rein in the wrong spot, crossing midsection or pulling to their hip bone, which is so popular in barrel racing. And I'm like, stop, you don't realize what you're doing. And that's causing emotional injuries.
Amazing.
Wow.
Go thereafter.
Well,
Savannah and Martin, you have me leaning forward. I am just so excited about this information and hadn't thought of it before. And even Martin, when you talked about your ear being lower than the other and that kind of thing, I wear a necklace that has a pendant on it that sits right at the breast collar, and it is always crooked. It always sits higher on one side of my breast collar, and it's making me think there's something going on there, right?
wow. And how many
Yeah.
thousands of dollars, Sandy, do we spend buying new horses, buying new
Yes.
saddles and therapies and just those poor horses, we just try to drill it and drill it and drill it, but we're drilling the wrong things into them that defy their structure.
Yeah.
And,
Yes.
and people aren't having these conversations enough. Savannah, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Yeah, no, I love, Sandy, that you're loving this, because it should be like, water in a desert, right? Like I call like this hamster wheel of insanity that we've all been on with our horses, and a lot of times with ourselves. And it's like, where do you even start? And like we don't have very many choices. Like you either exhaust yourself looking, for things on Google or where to get more training or figure this out. And I mean, honestly, not a lot of it's just repackaged of the same information. There is good stuff out there, but it's like when we cut to the source, we get to this, cut through the chafe, we cut to the chase and like get to the source of what's going on. It makes sense of everything else. And that's exciting.
Yes.
And like, back to the signs of asymmetry, what I started to notice, and I'm like, this video just needs to be out there as awareness, because I determined 7 different categories in our horses that are all signs of asymmetry. And like, your necklace being funny would be one, right? That's on a human, but like saddle slip, or preferring one lead versus the other, or, not standing square, or, being grouchy, like all of these things fit into one of the 7, categories of asymmetry. And I kind of lead you through that whole thing about, like a blanket slipping off to one side all the time. Like all these things, it's right in front of us. It's been right in front of us the whole time. And we've just like, how do we determine what's happening here? Like, I don't know how to translate this into something that's a workable, like, something that moves me forward and my horse forward. And that's what we're trying to do.
Well, we can do this with humans too,
Totally.
You can. So there's this thing called head forward posture.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We'll see people whose chin is leading. Then there's this thing that if you were to put a broomstick in your belly button, is it pointing straight out, or is it pointing down, or is it pointing up? And if you extrapolate that, it will result in a thing that your butt is either sticking up or tucked in under too harsh or whatever, right? But just a belly button will tell you which you are. And if your belly button's pointing out straight, you're good.
What? So how do we start to unpack this and get ourselves healthy, Martin? Life
Well,
dash.
awareness is the number one, right? You need to become aware that there is a thing. So then you notice, oh, shoot, I am not balanced, right? Like when I walk, I don't walk straight. My feet are actually like this. You're supposed to have imagine a pin through your hip bone, and the leg is supposed to swing freely off of the hip. Well, in many people, they're pushing their foot funny, or they'll swing it, flop, flop, flop with every step.
Just like a horse.
My left foot is typically slanted out.
Yeah.
And I
So
wear the
there's-
heel of my boots different. So I'll wear down my left heel, the outside heel.
Yeah. So there's something in your hip, which there's something in your pelvis, for which there's something in your neck, for which there's something in your atlas. There is a,
Right.
a teeny
Right.
switch here translates into a bigger switch somewhere else.
Yep. It's very
And it-
cool.
And mine is emotional. Well, that's what I want to know. I'm not
So-
afraid to look at the mirror
Okay,
anymore.
so we'll get into that. You will probably, I mean, I can find you people who are into this. I have worked with myself personally. I'm trained as a clinical hypnotherapist with NLP and all of that. I
Mhm.
just choose not to be working in that field because I thought that I do better when I focus on something that I can sell.
Yeah.
Because I can't make living with hypnosis without just treating one person at a time.
Yeah.
Right. Well, so get us a guest speaker, Martin.
So we'll work on that.
Assign you that task. Okay.
But anyway, so you can put your feelers out for, let's find somebody in body talk, somebody in EFT, emotional freedom technique, and somebody in emotion code. Now, here's something interesting. We have just bought that. It's called AO Scan, and it's a remote scanner. Oh, 1 second. There's this, watch this. There's this little thingy called Bone headset. You
Mhm.
can put that right on you like so, simple, and you plug it into your device, and I can scan you. And with that scanning,
Wow.
we can see the patterns. There's a vibrational thing that goes in and out with the body. So anyway, one of these days we'll bring something on that and talk about it. I mean, the
Okay.
time is short, but there is a method by which I can scan you remotely and tell you exactly what's going on with you.
Remotely. Okay, you just spoke Stahlheis language. We're online. Savannah, I heard you about to speak up. We've got a few
Yeah,
minutes.
I just was gonna say one other amazing resource. It's one of the modalities that I actually use. It's the acronym is BEST. So bioenergetic synchronization technique. And that was developed and that's a human, mostly, like, it's not really designed for horses, although you can do some like baby best and little things, but it's primarily a human thing because it deals with that emotional, our emotional subconscious, where we're stuck emotionally and how we're patterned and like stuck in a post-traumatic stress state, and interrupts that. And you can look at, so Dr. Mortar BEST is the technique, and you can find practitioners all over the place that'll do that. And that's really helped me personally a lot. So
There's another guest you should have.
there you go.
Dr. Mortar, MOT.
Dr. Mortar, I think he's gone now, like he may be passed, but his daughter is Sue, Dr. Sue Mortar.
How do you spell mortar?
Morter. Here, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. Man, this has been great. This is so good. It's given me a lot to marinate on all week. Sandy, you as well?
Thank you. And hey, Savannah and Martin, I have a podcast. It's called The Horse Fix. Would you be willing to be one of my guests at some point? And let me
That's what I
interview
do
you.
for a living.
Yeah,
Yay.
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I'll find out how to get in touch with you through Kendra, and I look forward to it.
Sure. Thanks for asking.
I love the networking. This has been fascinating. I definitely have a lot to chew on. Last week we talked about, so you did say something a minute ago, Savannah, about total body health, and you brought in digestion. We actually talked about that last week. digestion problems and what's happening inside that causes my runny nose, which irritates me when I have two reins in my hand. I'm like, this is so frustrating, and I'm tired of just, I could own stock in Kleenex, in the Kleenex company.
No.
Well, we talked about
This is
how
awesome.
Roundup, right? Roundup it was first an antibiotic, and now our horses are eating the grass, the hay, sometimes the grain that has been treated with Roundup. Well, it takes everything out, right? It takes out the good too, and we're seeing more ulcers than we ever have. So if this interests
Yeah.
you, if you want to have that discussion about Roundup and you're watching now or sometime in the future, if you have another hot topic that you want us to uncover here in Stall Talk, send us a line. Tell us what you're passionate about. What do you want help understanding, that my team and I can get an expert in here, a subject matter expert, and we'll have that conversation. So email us info@stallhigh.com, info@stallhigh.com. Also, if you have a suggestion for a guest speaker, we are definitely looking ahead throughout this year. Right now, we are at episode 17, and it happens to be January 17th, 2023. Hot dog. We're very excited about everything happening at Stall High. We are a community of horse owners and riders who are on a mission to be better, to do better by our horses. And that is by not being afraid to look in the mirror. Admit there are things that we don't know. Get excited when you do get answers and you see the results for yourself. Once you see the difference it can make in your horse, you can never unsee. Once you see how so much of the industry is stuck and they think it's a bit problem, they think it's a barrel angle problem, they think it's, I'm not holding this horse up and jockeying in enough circles problem. That's not it. It could very well be an emotional problem in the rider, and you can search for the next 45 years if you want to, and you can spend several $1 million, or you can just start doing the work right now and get better results a lot quicker. So we definitely want to flatten that learning curve. Savannah Allie Jackson, thank you so much. I'm so proud of our interactive members who are taking your course. Tell us briefly, how can someone get connected with you and the Optimum Horse?
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, I am too. I'm so excited because, and they're extremely excited. And, it's like, so just real quick before I answer that question, it's about really creating leadership in our communities, right? And I like, paying it forward and, empowering each other and figuring out how to fix these things ourselves, because it's entirely possible. Like, you don't have to rely on, outside, or trying to coordinate, or if you live remotely and it's hard to schedule somebody, it's like, that's what these, most of the people that come into my programs, whether they're a vet or a trainer or an owner or whatever it is, that's their view. But what happens is they're so inspired by the work that their vision, their original vision gets like, it grows into something much bigger. And they're like, I just want to help more horses and I want to help more people. And it's just the coolest thing. So my website is theoptimumhorse.com. You can jump in there. There's a, email list. I also have information about the mastery program, which is like how to actually learn how to do this yourself. That's set up a conversation and we can talk about that and what you would get out of it and all those fun things. The short, presentation, the signs of symmetry or signs of asymmetry, that's also something you can find out about there. But it's really, I'm on Facebook, I have my phone number. I'm pretty transparent, so you can find me in all those areas. And I'm just excited about sharing this work with everybody,
We can help connect you as well. Martin Patella, you sponsor Stall Talk every week. So we're so thankful to the expertise and the wisdom that you bring to the conversation every week. Your company is Life Enthusiast. There's a
Give me
link.
one sec here. Here's this. I want to say, people out there may feel like it's their fault or something, that they are
I did.
not quite right.
Yeah,
It's
I
not
thought
that. We pick up these things in childhood innocently without knowing why or how or whatever. These things happen. Don't try to kind of trip yourself into something wrong with me. No, you're just human. It's what's good here is that you came here into this life to learn something. And so when you discover that it's possible to undo your emotional stuff, that manifesting as your physiological stuff, just take it as a signal. When a student is ready, a teacher appears, take this as the appearance and say, oh, I could have different.
Mhm.
It's just the beginning of you that you can have different. There.
So good.
I
will
love
shout,
it.
Stop asking what's wrong, start asking what's missing. Want
Yeah.
answers? Download
Anyway,
the
you have
Stall High.
my link on your website. Connect through that.
Absolutely.
Do I have time to say one more little thing? Are we done?
Go for it, Savannah.
Okay,
We have
so
2
just
minutes.
on going on what Martin said, it's perfect segue because as horse people, and when they start to learn what I'm teaching, even if they come to see a demo or start to understand this, we blame ourselves. Like, why can't I fix my horse? And it becomes a confidence issue. Whether you're a trainer, like, why can't I get past this plateau with these horses? Or you walk into your barn and you've got this barn full of horses that you can tell aren't happy. And it's like, it becomes really miserable as a trainer and you're stuck. It's like, what are you supposed to do? And so it's not all our faults. Like, we look at, like, it's beautiful that we're trying to improve ourselves and learn about our own biomechanics and fix all the different things, but, start with the horse too. And there really is, like, it should be relief. It's like, oh, okay, it's not all from me. Like, I didn't screw this horse up. Like, I didn't break this horse. It's like, there's something there first and you
It's
can learn. Liberating.
It's liberating. And at the root of Stall High, we want freedom. We want to get out of the dadgum stall. Wherever it is, we feel stuck or stifled with our horses, with ourselves. Stall High, the community, we're here to help you take the next step. It's probably not going to be an enormous jump. That might be a little risky, but small progress every day, that's the key. Keep repeating, keep programming your mind with wisdom, with the information. And when you're on your horse, you'll be amazed. The right time, when you have prepared mentally, the right things happen. That's when we have those aha bullseye moments, Stall High moments. If you're watching now, if you're catching the replay at some point, you've just clicked into something called Stall Talk. We're here every Tuesday at noon Central. It's been my honor to be here with Savannah Alley Jackson, my co-host Martin Patella of lifeenthusiasts.com. Go to the Stall High app if you want information for either of these people and how to contact them. Come to the Stall High app if you want help with your horse. So it's easy. That's the first step I would encourage you to take. Just download the Stall High app and we'll help you with your journey. Lori Roth, thanks for moderating today. Sandy, thanks for being here. Kevin, great interaction as well. And everyone else who was able to join us in the Zoom. Savannah, are you busy at 6:00 tonight? Can you come to my class?
I will have to check my calendar. Let me check. I'll check my calendar.
I coach on Tuesday nights. So I'll go.
It's going to be tight. I will try. It'll be tight, but I will try.
I'll go catch those 2 bay mares and we'll do it again.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so
All right.
much. Thank you all
Thanks.
for being here. Have a great day.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
See y'all on Stall High.